Hi, welcome to Module 5 of Guiding Behavior. So the focus this week is going to be on culture and how culture affects both how we interpret the behavior of children and how culture influences how children act. Because what we find valuable in children's behavior, we reinforce in certain ways. So if my cultural perspective is one way, my daughters who I'm raising are going to end up fitting that cultural mold more because of the way that I interact with them. Okay, so that's culture influences our perspective of behavior in two ways. It actually influences the behavior that the children have, and it influences how we view that behavior. Okay, so when we're thinking about how culture affects children's behavior and affects how we view kids' behavior, there's two kind of important, useful ideas to think about. And I've certainly talked about this in other classes I've taught. It's something that even if you haven't had class with me, it's something that you might already be aware of. But it's this idea that some cultures value community and have a collectivist nature, whereas some cultures really value individualism and independence. And so those are two helpful ideas to help you kind of think about if you're a teacher from white dominant culture, if you chances are you value individualism and children's independence. But if you're working with families who are from a collectivist culture, and most other cultures in the world beyond European American and American culture, white culture, are collectivist by nature, your goals for the children might not match the family's goals for the children, and that's a potential conflict. And vice versa, if you are from a collectivist culture, your goals for the children might not match with the children, the white children's parents' goals. So it's a useful construct to think about, and neither one is better than the other. They just both are, and they influence the way that we think about behavior. So those are two important ideas to think about. So one of the articles, well, both of the articles that you will read for this module talk about collectivist and individualistic cultures. They might not use those words, but if you think about those concepts, you can recognize the cultures in the articles that kind of match with those two orientations. Okay, so an example that I have in early learning of when an individualistic culture has a different goal than a collectivist culture happens in toddler classrooms and childcare programs. So as a white toddler teacher in my past, I found it really exciting when kids would start to do things for themselves. So a child being able to feed themselves, a child being able to put their shoes on and their coats on for themselves, being able to put the toys away when they're done with them. These are all really exciting milestones for me in my orientation in an individualistic culture. And it's quite common in childcare, particularly for white teachers, to really celebrate those kind of milestones. Or teachers of color who orient in that individualistic culture. And also just anybody who's one person or is two adults in a room taking care of 14 kids in the room, right? You start to sort of value kids doing things for themselves just because of the sheer number of kids that you have to take care of. So regardless of why you might get excited when a child starts to feed themselves, there are some families that are not in their home encouraging kids to feed themselves for a variety of reasons. So it's quite common in some Asian communities, for example, particularly people who have recently immigrated to the United States, that their they're not giving their 2-year-old a bowl of yogurt and a spoon to feed themselves. That's not how that's going. The parent or the caregiver is feeding the 1 and 2-year-old food themselves, past when most white American families would be feeding the children. And there's a variety of reasons for that. One is just the practical nature of keeping the child clean, right? You give a 1-year-old a bowl and some yogurt, they're going to get totally messy. And in some cultures, that's okay for kids to get messy. And in some cultures, that's really not okay for kids to get messy. You know, and again, that has to do with a lot of things. One is resources, right? So if you have access to washer and dryer, it's no big deal for your kid to get messy. If you don't have access, or you come from a place in the world where people are washing clothes by hand. My sister-in-law is from the Philippines, and they wash clothes by hand. So getting her child all messy, that doesn't match with her upbringing. So she keeps him tidy because laundry is not just this thing that she takes for granted. So there's a lot of reasons for human behavior and why we do the things we do. But the conflict that comes up is that children are being raised in homes where they're not being encouraged to feed themselves. So then they come to childcare where they're expected to feed themselves, and then they're not eating because no one's feeding them. And they've been taught, all the 1 and 2-year-old know about the world is what they've experienced in their world, right? So if they haven't been encouraged at home to feed themselves, they get to childcare and they're not going to feed themselves. And so then they're going home hungry, and no parent, regardless of what culture you're from, wants your child to go home hungry, right? So that's a place where conflicts exist, where the parent who is from a more collectivist orientation. So it's not just about keeping the child clean. It's also about, I'm going to feed you because I'm going to take care of you. And then I'm going to know how much you're eating, and I'm going to encourage you to eat a little bit more. And that's my role as a mom, is to do that for you. So it's deep, right? That's how they show care. And when they send their child to childcare, they want you as the caregiver to do the same thing. So that's a place of potential conflict. So 2 teachers in a group with 14 kids can't be feeding all of them, right? But if you know that that's the value of this family, you probably could feed him. Or find ways to sort of gently transition him to the culture of the classroom that he's in, where the children feed themselves. But you support that transition gradually and with respect for how they're doing it at home. Not, can you believe that mom feeds him? He's 2 years old. Well, no, mom feeds him for a reason, and we have to respect that. But how can we make that work in the classroom? So that's what this module is about, is to sensitize yourself to the idea that there's lots of ways to take care of children, and there's lots of reasons for the things that parents do. And we can't judge that, and we have to find out about it. We need to ask them, and we need to understand what they do at home. Why do they do it? Why is that important to them? And respect it. Because there's not one right way to be. Our way always feels right to us because culture runs in us so deep. So we're always going to feel a little uncomfortable with ways that are different than ours. But, we got to get over that and be open to it, because there's just not one right way to be. And the right way to be as an educator is open and supportive of families. And so that's what it takes. So that's the goal of this week. Because this comes up a lot in behavior management. What we expect from children is based on our culture, and what children show up and bring to us is also influenced by their culture. And so if a child comes into the classroom acting a certain way and we interpret that as misbehavior, if that child is of a different culture than ours, then chances are it's not misbehavior. Chances are it's appropriate in their culture to be acting that way. And so you have to view it through that lens so that you can respectfully meet that child where they are and support them in getting ready to be in the classroom in the way that's going to make it possible for everybody to learn. Or you might have to shift your expectations of what classroom behavior looks like, because if what they're doing isn't actually disruptive to anyone's learning, then you might have to adapt what you expect and allow them to behave that way. So that's the goal of this module. I wanted to throw out in some of the readings, or in one of the readings, they use the word bicultural. And so I want to make sure you have a definition of that. So there's a term called bilingual, right? So somebody who speaks 2 languages is bilingual. Bicultural is a similar term. So a bicultural person is someone who has 2 cultures. And that can show up in a lot of different ways. So people of color who are living in the United States are bicultural. They have their cultural group, which is their racial or ethnic group, but then also they have to play by white dominant culture's rules and norms as well, because the institutions in this country are set up by white dominant culture. And so people of color, another term to use to describe people of color is a bicultural person, because they have 2 cultures. They have their own racial ethnic group culture, and if they've lived in the United States for any length of time, they learn to work within that culture as well. So that's an example of a bicultural person. And then certainly anybody who is an immigrant from another country to the United States is a bicultural person. They have their home. So even you can be white and you can be bicultural. So if you are from France and you move to the United States and you live here long enough to kind of adapt to U.S. culture, then you have 2 cultures. You're French and you're living in the United States. So you have 2 cultures. There's also I have a friend who's Chinese American, and she's married to a Japanese American man, and so her kids are like kind of tricultural, because they have Chinese culture and Japanese culture, and then of course are living in the United States, so they have United States culture. But it's important to recognize that being a bicultural person, that there's a skill set involved in that being able to navigate 2 different cultural worlds is a skill set. And so when we're interacting with bicultural children, we have to recognize that they have a skill set, and they can adapt in both worlds. So that's what bicultural is, someone who has 2 cultures. Okay, and the last thing I want to say before the end of this video is there's kind of a unique assignment this week. So I'm going to have you go out and I'm going to have you talk to 2 different parents and interview them about what their hopes and aspirations for their children, and then what do they do to help their kids get there. So for example, I value independence quite a bit. I'm from an individualistic culture and I value independence, and so with my own children, I right away taught them to sleep in their crib. Like, I'm telling you, day 1 they were sleeping in a crib. First they were 1 month old, and they were 3 weeks old, and we moved them into their own bedroom, right? So that's really an important value to me. To many of you, that's probably like, what? That's crazy that I did that. That's way too early, and you might even judge that and say, oh gosh, that's too early for children to be in their own room is 3 weeks old. So that's an example. So I value independence, and so I push them toward sleeping and nighttime independence like really, really early. So I want you to have those types of conversations with people who are parents. They can be currently have young children or children of any age, or have grown children. I want you to find 2 families, and I want them to be from different cultural groups, and that can be racial ethnic groups, religious groups, or national origin. Their national origin is different, and so that way we're having some comparison between people of different cultures, and their ideas about child rearing. So the discussion board this week is going to be like a brainstorm. I haven't written any questions, so you as a group are going to say, oh, this is a question I could ask. And you're going to share that in the discussion board. And then my idea is that you can pull your list of questions just from that discussion board. You're welcome to write your own or tweak the ones you see, but you don't have to come up with your own brand new ideas about what to ask. So that's what that discussion board is. And then I've set the due date for the interview assignment from 1 week from the close of the discussion board. Okay, so the discussion board will be, that due date will happen, and then you can grab your questions and you'll have a full week to do the interviews and then do the write-up. Okay, so the due date's going to look like way later than usual, but that's just so that you're prepped to do that assignment. So you will actually probably move on to module 6 and do the reading assignments and the discussion board for module 6 before you complete the interview assignment. Okay, so don't get hung up on that. Don't be like, oh, I haven't done this yet, so I'm not going to do the next module. Start the next module like you would normally on a Monday. But I just wanted to give you enough time because I know it's logistically it's challenging to get people for an interview. So, okay, I think that's it for this module, and I hope you enjoy the reading assignment. It's an article that I actually had when I was in graduate school. There's like little notes on it and like little stars that I drew when I was like 23 years old, so a long time ago. So yeah, anyways, I hope you enjoy the article. Okay, bye.